So, the first episode we ever put out on this channel was a comparison of Claude versus ChatGPT for legal work. And we're coming back to it because the tools haven't stood still, and neither has our view. The primary goal of this channel has always been to give you the best information on using AI in legal practice. That means we're not married to Claude. We use it because we think it leads for legal work right now. But if another tool pulls ahead, we'll say so. This episode is where we stand on that question right now, with a more developed view than the first time we covered it. Before the comparison, one thing about how we're evaluating this, because benchmarks and general capability comparisons don't tell you what you need to know as a practicing lawyer. 3 things actually matter for legal work. The first is context, how much of a document set the model can hold in one session, and whether the quality of output degrades as the session gets longer. For legal work, where a matter might span hundreds of documents, this is the foundational question. The second is instruction following, whether the model follows a complex, multi-part brief precisely. Legal workflows require specific outputs in specific formats with specific constraints. A model that drifts from the brief produces output that requires more correction than it saves. The third is output quality, specifically what the output requires before it goes anywhere professional. How much lawyer time does it take to get from a first draft to something you'd send to a client or file with a court? That gap is what determines whether a tool saves time or just moves work around. Those are the 3 lenses. Now the rounds. Round 1, long documents and context. And this is still the clearest advantage Claude has for legal work. When you're working through a large litigation file, building a chronology, running the 5-way discipline across 300 documents, asking the stress test prompt after an hour of orientation work, you need the model to still be applying the instruction you gave it at the start of the session. Claude maintains that consistency more reliably than ChatGPT across a long working session. ChatGPT's context handling has improved significantly with the O-series models. But for document-heavy legal work, where the brief is set at the start and needs to hold across an extended session, Claude's consistency advantage is still measurable. You notice it in the output. Claude keeps applying the instruction you gave it an hour ago. ChatGPT sometimes doesn't. Round 1 verdict. Claude, clearly. Context consistency across long, document-heavy sessions is Claude's strongest advantage for legal work, and this hasn't changed. Round 2, instruction following and the brief. The 6-element brief works because Claude actually follows it. Both parts of that sentence matter. When you give Claude a brief with a toward, away from instruction, moving away from, so hedged the client cannot make a decision, Claude doesn't produce a heavily hedged letter. ChatGPT sometimes does. It treats the register instruction more like a suggestion than a constraint. This shows up most clearly in client-facing documents, where the register matters as much as the content. A client advice letter that's been briefed to be direct and clear should be direct and clear throughout, not cautious in the liability clause and direct everywhere else. Claude holds the instruction consistently. The O-series reasoning models have improved ChatGPT's instruction following for structured analytical tasks. For tasks with clear logical structure and right-wrong outputs, the gap has narrowed. Where it hasn't narrowed is in tone and register instructions, which Claude still handles more consistently. Round 2 verdict, Claude by a margin. Smaller than it was, but still real. Round 3 is the honest round, because ChatGPT hasn't stood still, and pretending otherwise wouldn't be useful to you. 3 areas where ChatGPT has a genuine case. First, structured analytical reasoning with the O-series models. For tasks where the conclusion follows from a well-defined framework and the steps need to be shown explicitly, systematic document categorization, structured legal analysis where you want the reasoning visible, O3 and O4 Mini are competitive with Claude and sometimes ahead. Second, Microsoft 365 integration. If your firm runs on Microsoft, document review inside Word, email drafting inside Outlook, Teams integration, Copilot's integration story is increasingly relevant in a way that Claude currently doesn't match. For lawyers whose workflow runs through Microsoft, this is a genuine practical advantage. Third, web browsing for current information. ChatGPT's browsing integration allows it to pull recent cases, updated legislation, and current regulatory positions. For research where currency matters, this is an advantage, though verify everything, regardless of which tool found it. Round 3 verdict, ChatGPT leads in these specific areas. They're not the core legal workflow tasks, but they still matter. Round 4, drafting quality, and the question that actually matters. What does the first draft require before it goes anywhere professional? Claude holds a consistent voice across a long document more reliably than ChatGPT. A 10-clause contract drafted by Claude reads as though one person wrote it. ChatGPT drafts can shift register across sections, more formal in some clauses, more conversational in others, in a way that requires re-registration work before the document is professional. The clearest test is the client advice letter. Claude, given the 6-element brief with a specific client register and toward /away from instruction, produces a first draft that requires fewer corrections before it goes to the client. ChatGPT produces a first draft that requires more work pulling it back to this specific person and situation rather than a generic client of this type. That correction time is what the comparison is actually about. Both models produce something. The question is how much lawyer time goes between the output and the professional standard. For legal drafting, Claude's output requires less of that time. Round 4 verdict. Claude, for legal drafting specifically. Round 5, the research question. And this is the round where neither tool wins cleanly. Claude flags uncertainty more consistently when instructed to. Verify instruction combined with the verification suite prompt produces a more conservative second pass from Claude than the equivalent from ChatGPT. Claude is more likely to say, "I'm not certain about this," when it isn't. And that's what makes it safer to use as a starting point for legal research. ChatGPT's browsing integration is an advantage where currency matters. Recent decisions, updated legislation, current regulatory positions. For research that requires up-to-date information, ChatGPT, with browsing enabled, has something Claude's base model doesn't. But here's the thing neither tool changes: the verification standard. Both models hallucinate. Both require verification of every legal proposition against a primary source before anything goes out under your name. The professional obligation, verify before it goes anywhere, applies equally to Claude and ChatGPT output. Round 5 verdict, draw. Specific advantages on each side, but the verification standard is the same for both. So where does that leave us? Claude still leads for the core legal workflow tasks, long document sessions, complex brief following, voice and register consistency in drafting, and context quality across extended sessions. ChatGPT leads in specific areas: Microsoft 365 integration, image generation, structured reasoning tasks with the O-series models, and web browsing for current information. The gap is narrower than it was when we first made this comparison. It hasn't closed. If you're a practicing lawyer whose primary AI use is document analysis, drafting, verification, and matter orientation, Claude is still where we'd send you. If you're in a Microsoft 365 firm or you need image generation regularly, ChatGPT has a case. And the thing worth saying clearly, the methodology matters more than the tool. A lawyer using Claude badly gets worse results than a lawyer using ChatGPT well. The verification habit, the 6-element brief, the 5-way discipline. These apply regardless of which model you're running them in. We're watching the O-series reasoning models, Gemini's context window, and the legal-specific AI tools being built on top of both. If the verdict needs to change, you'll hear it on this channel first. That's the episode. See you in the next one.